try to act like the way sisters treat us doesn't have a history that we are not at least partly responsible. So when a sister says, I don't need a man, because she couldn't find one strong enough to hold her down. Black men are not raising black boys to be the men our community needs. That is 100%. She had to become masculine to survive the rape, the molestation, the domestic abuse. Are you telling me you can't see how we created that?
I understand that, but she needs to be more selective.
If we was loving our women and taking care of our women, do you think she would be like that? Do you think she would be like that? Do you think she would be like that? Do you think she would be like that?
This is part one of our deep dive. The intention is to show that not all black women are the same, and not all black men are the same. Yet there is a narrative that seeks to focus on a specific set of circumstances found among certain black women, and blame the entire ordeal on all black men. We begin our deep dive addressing the notion that a black woman who has vitriol for black men is justified due to the plight and struggle of our predecessors.
Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee, it was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens.
This is Fannie Lou Hamer, a very prominent black woman in the American historical record, who, if you are not familiar with her story and what she stood for, you would do well to research the powerful messages that she left behind. Now, this black woman, who was defined as Negro at the time, traveled with a group of reportedly 26 individuals in pursuit of exercising her right to vote, where she was assaulted by law enforcement, placed into a prison, and beaten. Now listen to her as she details who it was that was instructed to carry out this horrendous act.
I was carried out of that cell into another cell where they had 2 Negro prisoners. The state highway patrolman ordered the first Negro to take the blackjack. The first Negro prisoner ordered me, by orders from the state highway patrolman, for me to lay down on a bunk bed on my face. And I laid on my face. The first Negro began to beat. And I was beat by the first Negro until he was exhausted. I was holding my hands behind me at that time on my left side because I suffered from polio when I was 6 years old. After the first Negro had beat until he was exhausted, the state highway patrolman ordered the second Negro to take the blackjack.
Black men, 2 of them to be exact, were instructed by the white patrolmen to punish Fannie Lou Hamer. Now, do you believe that these 2 men who acted in cowardice, following the orders of an evil overseer, were the representation of all men who happened to share the same skin tone as she did? I highly doubt that that was even her sentiment, considering that she was married at that time to a man who was also black, and stayed married to that same man for 33 years until her death in 1977. In fact, years after she faced that brutal ordeal in Mississippi, she could be found advocating on the behalf of black men and women. But according to the premise of Umar, she should have been masculine with a bone to pick with all black men.
She had to become masculine to survive the rape, the molestation, the domestic abuse. Are you telling me you can't see?
But she wasn't. Perhaps because at one point in time, even people who were so-called black knew how to separate the wheat from the chaff amongst themselves. But now a narrative is being spun that seeks to use the fight for liberation of our predecessors and what they went through as the cause and culprit to the lackluster behavior of their descendants, as well as those who are often confused as being their descendants. The hardships faced by black women of yesterday are cited as the reason for much of the behavior of the women of today, without factoring in that the behavior of today would have been widely unacceptable, according to those women whose stories they use to condone this behavior. There is no contestation to the historical fact that it was mostly black men who were beaten and or left lifeless post-slavery. But no one will be so bold as to suggest that black male degeneracy is caused by the death of Medgar Evers. And if indeed it is the history of hardships that cause masculinization, would not the men who have a history of hardships likewise become even more masculine as a result of the disproportionate amount of violence inflicted upon the men who preceded them. Yet this is not the case. In fact, men are considered far less masculine than their predecessors, according to some narratives. So how is it that this reason is used for women, but not the men? It's because it is baseless and has no merit, at least not in the way that it's being used to indict black men as the reason for why a black woman would abandon the path of her foremothers. But let's say that we accept the premise that motherhood causes masculinity when that mother finds herself parenting alone. Then certainly that doesn't explain the masculinization of the women who have no children. That certainly doesn't explain the masculinization of career-driven women who have chosen to prioritize themselves over the creation of a family. If indeed it is hardships that are the root cause of masculinization, then why not be masculine during slavery? Why not be masculine during Jim Crow? Why now? If it's all of those things that he mentioned, why now? And why put the onus all upon black men? Here's a black woman who seems to exude masculine energy, whose narrative contradicts what Umar suggests as the reason for why a black woman would be faced with the outcomes that she currently finds herself in.
I divorced my husband. Why did I divorce my husband? I divorced my husband because I was making a certain amount of money. I divorced my husband because I thought I didn't need him anymore. I divorced my husband because I had this senior position at work and thought I held the same position at home. I divorced my husband because I thought I was better than him because I had my degree now. I divorced my husband because I thought a successful marriage meant I was here and he was down here. That is not success. That's sickness. I found myself divorced and out there looking for love in all the wrong places. This one and that one and that one and that one and this one and that one. And my body count going up and my value going down. I'm just going to call it like a TI is. All the while, my husband done found somebody else building a relationship and building a life with them. I should have stayed married to my husband. I felt like I was on this dark road with no street lights, pitch dark, and I couldn't find my way and didn't know which way to go. I felt lost. I felt like I was walking barefoot on that dark road with pebbles and hot rocks sticking my foot. I felt hurt. I felt alone because every time he and that one and this one and that one left my bed, I was alone all by myself. And which was supposed to be soft and comfortable for me, my pillow, it was now filled with tears. I should not have left my husband.
Had not she shared this dose of accountability, there would be some guy somewhere in Panderville that would assume that it was all a man's fault, which is a problem. Because people aren't considered individuals anymore. They are conveniently labeled by a group name. So for some, it is women. For some, it is men. For some, it is black. And for some, it is a religion. But what happens in one place is then used to define the cause for what happens in all places, which is intellectually lazy. Yes, there are men who are black who are problems, but they have always existed. There was a point in time where the women were instructed not to mess with those types of guys. There was no point in time where they did not exist, but there was a point in time where the women were instructed to stay away from them. But nowadays, 20% of the men get the women and 80% of the men that even Umar suggests does not exist are constantly being ignored because they don't fit the description of what is the popularized man. Do you have any idea the level of scrutiny a woman would face from her own girlfriends, especially if she is a career woman that is making quite a good income? Do you have any idea the level of scrutiny she would face if she were to date a not so appealing man, who, not so appealing in the face man of integrity who made $20 an hour? the level of scrutiny that she would face from other women. This has nothing to do with the existence of good men. It has to do with where you shop and who it is that you're looking for, what your radar is set to. Now, how do you propose that a black man or any man is supposed to deal with this unwanted behavior? Matter of fact, when the man who is in her life tried to voice his concerns, it was women who attacked him for suggesting that the mother of his child conduct herself with a level of decorum. So was it the fact that she didn't have a good man that was the reason for her choice to wear what she wore, or for her choice to get intimately close to the man who was singing in the video? So if people like Umar suggest that the fault for this behavior is the black man, then how do people like Umar propose that the black man was to prevent her from operating of her own volition? There's no solution that I'm aware of other than suggesting that women should be the prisoners of the will of men. So is this what he's suggesting? If not, then it must be reason that he's unwilling to acknowledge that there are women who make their choices in spite of a man who is a man of integrity. Which is why it is ridiculous to suggest that women are inherently incompetent individuals who raise pookies as a default when a man is not present, or that a woman's character is the reflection of the man that she doesn't have access to. And if you actually pay closer attention to the video, you can clearly see who it is that Keke Palmer is entertaining. It's not just herself, and it's not Usher. It's her girlfriends. And believe it or not, it is my contention that a woman is more directly influenced by women than she is influenced by men. And it is this influence that causes her to be drawn to a certain type of man or a certain type of lifestyle that lends to her status within her social group. So how did it get to this point where suddenly black women are defending the right for another woman to show her cheeks to the world and live a life of promiscuity and frivolity? Was that the fault of the black man? Actually, no. In fact, I put together a production that pretty much amounts to a video confession from women in big business that admit to manipulating women with lies in order to make money. And it all started when the women's liberation movement suddenly married itself to the sexual revolution. Let's go back to 1970.
Helen Gurley Brown is a very successful lady who does a kind of frightening thing. She edits a magazine, and in Cosmopolitan magazine every month she tells girls how to get man.
There's a discrepancy, a disparity, you know, between girls and men. There's 6 million more unmarried girls than there are men, so you men are a very precious commodity, and we do tell girls how to go about attracting you.
What do you guys think men want?
We do tell girls how to go about attracting you.
This is Helen Gurley Brown, the once upon a time chief editor of Cosmopolitan magazine, a very influential publication with women as the focal point. And according to Helen Gurley Brown, Cosmopolitan magazine was instructing women on how to have better success at attracting men.
We do tell girls how to go about attracting you.
Well, 50 years after giving that statement, Cosmopolitan magazine is still popular, but marriage is down, divorce is up, and men are saying that women are more clueless than ever before, or, better yet, delusional.
I am the table!
Is Helen Gurley Brown one of the founding mothers of modern delusion?
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty, oh so pretty.
Helen Gurley Brown was the editor of Cosmo. She's the one that took Cosmo and turned it from a general interest magazine into a sex rag. Helen had a favorite slogan embroidered on a little pillow she kept on a love seat in her office, and the slogan said, "Good girls go to heaven, bad girls go everywhere." And at Cosmo, we turned all traditional values upside down. It was good to live with your boyfriend, good to sleep with a married man, good to take the pill, good or at least necessary to have an abortion to get ahead. And all of this in the 1970s, early 1970s, came as a shock to most Americans. A lot of single women, if a lot of single women were going to bed with men on the first or second date, they surely weren't talking about it. You couldn't find these people.
Well, you can now. And most of the women who held on to the old traditions find themselves at odds with the post-cosmopolitan women.
That's missing in this community.
No, the women sorry. Now, they may not like me for saying it, but these younger women today, they don't even raise their children. Their children raising them.
I am a traditional woman. I was raised by grandparents, so I'm very old school. I watched my grandpa take care of my grandma, pay all the bills, and what did she do? Cook, clean. Like, she went out of her way to go above and beyond. And I was raised, I watched her do these kinds of things, cater to him, make food for him. Does that make sense?
So how did we get to the point where so many young women today think to be free is to go to college, get a great degree, have a fantastic job, and be as sexually free as possible? How did those two radically separate movements ever get joined together?
The women who were traditional wives are often frowned upon by the women who bought into the New Age woman type of lifestyle. The Olivia Popes and Scandals, Sex and the Cities, and Insecures promulgated and glamorized the promiscuous woman that most men avoid wifing up, but women still gravitated to it. And some even took it a step further and turned the idea of sexual frivolity into a movement under the guise of empowerment. So for a man to have standards as far as what he expects in a potential wife was now looked at as a patriarchal oppression of a woman's right to autonomy. And if he can't accept you as you are, then the problem is his. But according to Sue Ellen Browder, this division was by design.
The sexual revolution was a very divisive movement. You know, truth, beauty, and goodness unite. And what does evil do? It divides people. It separates us apart. So at Cosmo, we split sex from love. If sex is just for fun, if it feels good, do it. We split sex from marriage. It's okay to live with your boyfriend. We split women from men. If you don't like him, just divorce him. And we split sex from babies. With take the pill, and if the pill fails, get an abortion. What? Betty Friedan, as I said, was so appalled by Cosmo, she called it quite obscene and quite horrible, and she urged women to boycott the magazine.
So here you had two agendas pitted against one another. Women in one segment of society wanted equal rights, while women in another segment were being sold, dare we say, delusion? In fact, Cosmopolitan magazine would make up stories and pass it off as true account, creating authoritative sources out of thin air, because after all, there was no Google to check the facts back in 1970. So what the godmother of delusion soon realized was that the more that you can lure a woman into delusion, the more likely she is to buy what it is that you're selling. This was Cosmopolitan's tactical approach, all for monetary gain.
Why all of this hijacking of the women's movement? Money. Why was Cosmo so successful? Because it attracted advertisers. Why did it attract advertisers? Because it worked. When a young woman, an insecure young woman, reads these magazines and thinks that she has to have perfume, cosmetics, hair products, beautiful clothes, singles travel.
Women, we want this lifestyle that's not even realistic nowadays. Like, we want men that make more than we do, and we want them to pay all of the bills. But it's like, we all have our nails done, we get our hair dyed, we have makeup, we have all of this stuff that costs money because we want this lifestyle. And I've had girls come on my show and I say, would you date an average guy for companionship, but you would have to go down in lifestyle? And they say, no, we're addicted to lifestyle.
It's all about me. If you can convince a woman that everything is about her, then she has to buy a whole bunch of stuff to make herself so wonderful.
These are the narratives that abound. These are the forces that seek to plant the seeds of doubt and dissatisfaction into the minds of the insecure and impressionable. Whether delusion is the cause or the symptom, there are many men who are fathers. Some of those fathers have daughters. Daughters that have been told to drink from the chalice of delusion and destruction. And so we do our due diligence to clean up the mess that was made, so they may realize that all along,
if inside she knows who she is, she doesn't need all that stuff.
Perhaps most important, its influence radiating to every part of life is the breakdown of the Negro family structure. It flows from centuries of oppression and persecution of the Negro man. It flows from the long years of degradation and discrimination which have attacked his dignity and assaulted his ability to produce for his family. And when the family collapses, it is the children that are usually damaged.